What's up, Helldivers? It's Sacro. I recently asked a friend which support stratagem he could be convinced to use with a good enough build, and he said the Flamethrower. So here we go. I don't usually play with the Flamethrower, although I hear it's a pretty daggone good stratagem, and I wanted to try my hand at it because I really want my friends to play all the stratagems in the game. I think that they're all so great, and I feel like I say it all the time. It started off rough because the Flamethrower is a difficult stratagem to use, but after a few hours and after getting used to the flow, I really started to like it. I came up with a build and a couple tips that should help you hit the ground running when it comes to using the Flamethrower. So here we go, this is my Incinerator build. So I think it's important to mention before I start, the Flamethrower is bugged right now, or rather, dots are bugged from what I'm hearing. They're only really working properly for the host, so keep this build in mind for when they fix it. I'm sure they'll get to it. They've been pretty good with updating and keeping stuff working right. I think they've been doing a good job. I know they've been catching a lot of slack lately, but yeah, you know. All right, let's get to it. The first stratagem is going to be the Flamethrower, of course. Yeah, it's the Incinerator build. Second, it's going to be the Gaurd Dog Rover, the laser version. Just to make it clear. The other version was actually the one that got nerfed a bit. I think it took a 30% hit, and people have been getting them confused. This one should still be fine. I mean, it works fine to me. Still does all the same things. It's not going to completely save the day, but it's definitely going to get you out of a pinch. It works really well with the burn of the Flamethrower as well. They synergize, because the burn damage happens over time, laser damage happens over time. You're not mixing up damage over time with, like, you know, an explosive burst with these two. So that works really well. Third one's going to be the 500 kg, and you know, that's kind of up to you. I like the 500 kg because it can get rid of a charger in a pinch. It can get rid of a Bile Titan with a little bit of aiming and timing. You could also kind of deal with hordes with it. For a stratagem, I think you're going to have to bring really whatever works best for you. You could fit the Eat here if you're more comfortable with using that to deal with situations. I normally bring the Eat, and I have paired it with a lot of my builds, but with this build, it's not as necessary because you can just walk up to the Shrieker Nest. You don't have to take out the Shrieker Nest from far away, but it does take out that ability if you don't bring the Eat, so weigh your options. You could also bring, for the fourth one, the 380 or the Walking Barrage. Now, realistically, the last two stratagems on this, you can bring whatever you're comfortable with, but these are the ones I suggest. The only thing that's really necessary for this is going to be your Flamethrower and your Gaurd Dog, as well as the main weapon to get that real synergy going. The rest of these are just to deal with whatever situations you're dealing with, so you do want to switch them out based on if you're dealing with eggs, if you're dealing with holes, if you're dealing with missions where you have to stay still. On that note, I would suggest to bring the auto cannon for missions that you're going to be staying still for. But you know, and I've covered that extensively. I think it's an awesome stratagem. When protected properly, when placed properly, it can do some serious damage. So for your main weapon, I'd say either bring the Sickle, the Breaker Incendiary, or the Eruptor. The Sickle is kind of like the easy version, just kind of point and shoot. Definitely want to hip fire this guy as often as you can, and you want to try and keep it so you don't overheat, you know, the basics. The Breaker Incendiary, it's just great for dealing with hordes, and it's a little more on the... Actually, I think I said that wrong. The Sickle is the medium, the Breaker Incendiary would be the easy, and the Eruptor, that's going to be the hard. And I think we all know why. The Eruptor is definitely harder to use, but those... the juice is definitely worth the squeeze if you are comfortable with it. For a secondary weapon and armor, it's kind of up to you. For this build specifically, I do like to bring the Redeemer, but of course the Senator and the Peacemaker are good enough choices. Armor, I always like to bring an armor with the engineering perk, but I'm hearing a lot of people say they like to bring the armor with the 50-50 chance of living. You guys let me know in the comments, which armors do you like to bring? I feel like as I play this game more, I'm learning that that's really based off of your playstyle, unless of course it's going to tie into a synergy. And with this build, it doesn't really need to, because like I said, you're already dealing with that with the main weapon, the Flamethrower, and the Gaurd Dog. I like to bring the impacts for this one. It's also permissible, of course, to bring the heavy grenade. I think that's the first grenade you start out with. And maybe a frag, I guess, you know, whatever your choice is. So with the flamethrower, it's a really weird weapon to use, but like I said, when you use it right, it's gonna really start to show you those 30 bombs. It's gonna show you those maybe 50 bombs if you're really getting lucky, just because, well, I'll explain. Your first tip is gonna be to use the red carpet. And after I explain it, you guys can tell me if that's a good enough name. I've also kind of thought of the turn and burn, but you know, hey, sit down, listen up. We'll go through this. So what you want to do is when you've got a horde behind you, you don't really want to be burning down specific targets. You want to be laying out a red carpet of fire behind you. And how you do that is you simply point the flamethrower towards the ground a little bit. If you point it too far towards the ground, you won't get that far. You won't get that much fire coverage. If you point it too far up, you're not going to burn the ground. Kind of got to find that sweet spot. And I got some footage showing here. You know, take a peek. So as you're running, like I said, you're turning, you're burning the ground behind you. You're doing this periodically, and eventually the dots will add up. And you'll start to see those light and medium enemies dying out. That'll make it so that you can deal with the chargers and the maybe even brood commanders that make it through, because the heavies aren't going to die to this unless they're walking through it for a really long time. And realistically, you're not going to be able to lay out the longest carpet of fire before you run into other groups. So you do kind of want to keep this short, not short, but you don't want to drag it on for too long. As you're running and burning and turning and burning, your las is burning away at everybody as well, and you can turn around and focus fire some of them down if you want, but like I said, you really just want to keep the fire going. You want to keep that red carpet going until you do run into a heavy, and that's when you're going to go into a direct fire with the heavy. And that leads us into our next tip. Direct and indirect fire is really important with the flamethrower. Most times with guns, you're worried about shooting directly at your enemy, even getting headshots. But with this weapon, you're going to change where you're pointing, where you're shooting with each enemy, depending on how far they are from you. After you've done the turn and burn technique, you might run into a brood commander, you might run into a heavy, you might run into a charger, and you're going to want to start burning them down directly. The brood commander burn at its head, and the charger you're going to burn at its foot. You can burn at one of its legs, but I think the feet kind of do a little more damage to his nice juicy bits. So after you've decided, you know, which targets you want to direct and indirect fire with, and get comfortable with that, and get comfortable with moving with the turn and burn, then you can move on to our next tip. And that's, of course, a step backwards, which you might have already figured out, but I do want to cover this. When you're shooting with the flamethrower, you want to be moving backwards, but also what that means is you want to clear what's behind you. So you want to be peeking and making sure that you're going on a proper path instead of focusing on that group behind you. If you want to burn people down, you have to be moving backwards, because if you move forward at all, you're going to start catching fire damage. And quickly, if you want to get rid of fire damage, you need to jump. I guess that can just be a tip. When you get burned, jump. When you start hearing your guy making some funny noises, jump. When you start seeing him crisp up, jump. That is the fastest way. Don't try and stem through that. You're not going to make it. Just jump. Lastly, what you want to do with enemies is you want to draw them into you so that you can start the turn and burn / red carpet technique. So you're going to kind of run up to the group that you want to target, aggro them, start the turn and burn, and make sure you keep a good enough distance, especially when you got nursing spearers and bow spearers. You want to keep that good distance away from them and make sure that they don't get too close to you. Don't commit too hard, because this is a slower weapon. Lastly, bonus tip, never aim down sights with a flamethrower. Alright guys, so you made it to the end. Nice. So before I go, I just wanted to ask, you know, how are you guys liking the flamethrower? What are your builds with it? And do you think that anything might work a little better to bring out the shine of the flamethrower? It's not an S tier weapon, but it is super fun, and it does make it so you don't have to aim down everybody. You can kind of just mindlessly burn. And so, you know, I'm having a good time with it. I think it's super fun, and I think it needs to be played. But people seem to be playing this weapon pretty often, at least from the YouTube videos. I don't see it as often in the random matchmaking queues. So, yeah, let me know. But if you made it this far, go ahead and consider leaving a like, comment, answer some of the questions I asked earlier. Maybe tell me something that you think I could do in an X build. Yeah, that would actually be pretty cool. I'd love to hear about what you guys want to see done, what you don't see often. And yeah, thanks for joining me. Peace.